What's up, everybody? We are back with another history of video. Today we are talking specifically about the Pajero. We already did a Mitsubishi history video. Today we're focusing specifically on the Pajero because obviously I like the Pajero. I got the evolution behind me. We are not going to get into the motorsports history of Pajero and Dakar. I'm going to do a separate video on that. I mentioned in my history of Mitsubishi video, we're going to do a motorsports video. I'm just going to do a Dakar video, and if I own a rally art vehicle at some point, like an Evo, I'll talk about that then. But today we're just going to focus purely on the history of the actual Pajero car. We're going to hit the highlights throughout the generations. We're not going to focus on every minute detail because I don't have the time to film and edit a 2+ hour video, which if you really want to dive into the history, it's that. But that's enough yapping. So before the Pajero, you can trace the history of off-road in Mitsubishi back to the PX33 military sedan. That was a prototype in 1934 built for the military. It was the first Japanese sedan with full-time four-wheel drive. And then post-World War II, there was a contract under one of the Mitsubishi brands to make the, I believe is the CJ33 Jeep. And so that's where their off-roader history traces back to. But as far as the Pajero, the first prototype of a Pajero was shown in 1973 at the Tokyo Motor Show. Nothing really came of it. And then a second prototype was shown at the Tokyo Motor Show, the Pajero 2, in 1978. So then that Pajero 2 prototype was essentially what the Pajero's first generation would be. The first generation is known as either the L040 or the L140, depending on short or long wheelbase. The first production Pajero was shown in 1981 at the Tokyo Auto Show. It was very similar to the Pajero 2 prototype, and sales started in 1982. Initially, the only model available was the three-door, the short wheelbase with a metal or canvas roof, and there was a plethora of different engine options. You had a 2-liter inline-4, 2-liter inline-4T, 2.6-liter inline-4, a 3-liter V6, an inline-4 naturally aspirated diesel, a 2.3-liter inline-4 turbo diesel, and a 2.5-liter inline-4 turbo diesel. The main two powertrains are really obviously the 3-liter V6 and the 2.5-liter inline-4 diesel, although the 2-liter inline-4 turbo gas was very good as well. And then in February 1983, they brought upon the 5-door, the longer wheelbase car, and that was introduced with that 2.0-liter inline-4T, and the 2.3-liter inline-4 turbo diesel was introduced. And then in July of 1983, later that year, they introduced the high roof, which is what it sounds like. There is a bump in the roof for more headroom in the cabin. And then in September of 1987, the Exceed model, which was the flagship luxury model that got more comfortable leather seats and more comfort features and wood grain and all sorts of luxury features, was introduced in 1987. And the JDM market got a higher trim of that called the Super Exceed, which was even more luxurious. And then in 1988, a 2.5-liter turbo diesel was introduced. And what's significant about that 2.5-liter turbo diesel is it was the first ever time that an intercooler was fitted to a 4x4 off-road vehicle. And those are all the highlights of the first generation. So moving on to the second generation, we're talking the generation that debuted in January 1991. So that was the V20, V30, and V40 Pajeros. Those come with a metal top or a canvas top for the short wheelbase, aka the 3-door, and the semi-high roof and the high roofs were available as standard in the long wheelbase when it debuted in January 1991. Initially, it was just available with a 3-liter V6 and a 2.5-liter turbo diesel. The big advancement that came in this generation was the Super Select 4-wheel drive system, also known as Active Track in some markets. And what this system allowed you to do was to select between 2 high, 4 low, and 4 high, and you could actually switch from 2 high to 4 high, and up to about 50 miles an hour on the move, whereas before most four-wheel drive select systems only allowed you to do it while stationary. And then in July 1993, the 3.5-liter dual overhead cam V6 was introduced. And so all the V6s before this were all single overhead cams. This was the first dual overhead cam introduced for the Pajero. and a bigger 2.8-liter turbo diesel was made available as well. The main highlight we got from the second generation was the Pajero Evolution, like I have behind me, and that's actually the V55. It has its own chassis code, and that was introduced in 1997 as a homologation for the Dakar Rally. Just brief, like I said, we're going to do a whole history on the Dakar Rally, but it's a race typically from Paris to Dakar through the West African desert. And in the 1998 rally, the T2 class, which was a modified production car class, required 1,000 plus homologation specials. So they brought out the Pajero Evolution. The Pajero Evolution was made in about 2,500-ish to about 2,650, depending on who you ask, with somewhere between like 2,400 and 2,500 automatics, and maybe up to 100 to 150 manuals spread across silver, white, and red, with red manual being the most rare combination, then white manual, then silver manual, and so on, red automatic, white automatic, and then silver automatic. Silver was overwhelmingly the majority of the colors. But what was really special about the Pajero Evo, besides the Dakar roots, was the independent front and rear suspension, the wider fender flares. But what really, really was special was now it had a 3.5-liter, 24-valve dual overhead cam V6, where prior the most was 2 valves per cylinder. This was 4 valves per cylinder, dual overhead cam. But what really was special was the Mitsubishi innovative valve timing and electronic lift control, abbreviated MIVEC, which is Mitsubishi's VTEC. So this was the first vehicle fitted with that VTEC, dual overhead cams, 4 valves, plus a dual plenum intake to give you better airflow and cooling for the engine, and long travel independent rear suspension, which I mentioned before. There was front independent suspension, but now there was independent rear suspension. All of these were first, really, for Mitsubishi for the most part, but all of them were definitely first on the Pajero. And obviously the Pajero Evolution is the highlight for the Pajero, probably overall, but definitely for the second generation. And it came in 1997 and was made until 1999, leading into the third generation. So moving on to the third generation, or the V60 and V70 chassis codes, there wasn't a whole lot special about the third generation from the second generation. It debuted in Japan in 1999. It was another generation that we got in North America. They moved from body-on-frame to a unibody construction, so they lost a little bit of the off-roader cred, although we see that throughout all SUVs from this period and into modern day. They refined the Super Select system. They just made it better, but it's still the same basic concept. It got a new 3.8-liter V6, and the only real highlight or the only thing worth mentioning besides some of the updates was that it was the last generation in North America that we got. And I think it was the last truly special Pajero in a lot of people's eyes. Even though it didn't sell super well in like North America. And by the way, it was the Montero in North America and in some other countries, and it was the Shogun in the UK. But the third generation did not sell as well as the first two generations, and so it ended in North America. It was available in Europe, like the West Asia region, and then of course in Asia itself, and then a lot of developing nations in like Africa and stuff, but not a significant jump for the Pajero from the second to third generation. So moving on to the fourth generation, which debuted in September of 2006, giving the third generation about a 7-year run, but the V80 and V90 chassis codes for the short and long wheelbases now got an upgraded 3.2-liter turbo diesel and a 3.8-liter V6, now with the MIVEC system, so it wasn't just from the Pajero Evolution. And a 3-liter V6 was retained in Japan, but not elsewhere throughout the world. Now we are onto the Super Select 4-wheel drive 2 system that was improved with active stability and traction control, as well as electronic brake distribution. We know what stability and traction control is. Electronic brake distribution, just making sure when you hit that brake pedal, it's distributed evenly to all 4 corners of the car. Interestingly, they gave this car up to 8.7 inches of ground clearance and a 700 millimeter wading depth. Gave it more skid plating, a carbon fiber drive shaft, an aluminum hood to save weight, and now they also had a second battery mounting place in terminals, so you could put in a second battery to help in super cold weather, or to attach a winch or other off-road accessories without having to worry about draining your main battery. They really went all in to make this a real off-roader again, although it's still unibody. And in 2009, they even got a rear locking differential standard, so they were really trying to make this a real off-roader again, and I think it's a real shame we didn't get it in North America. Maybe it could have really competed with the 4Runner, who really started, which was popular, the 4Runner and the Land Cruiser, but really started to boom in the 2000s. It got a facelift in 2012. It just changed a little bit of the looks, but it got a more significant change when it got facelifted again in 2014. Now in 2014, the manual was dropped completely except for on the very base trim. The 3-door variant was discontinued in 2018. And then in 2019, they released a final edition in Japan only based off of the Exceed trim, the luxury trim, with only 700 total released. And then, unfortunately, despite all their efforts to try to revive the Pajero and really make it a big popular off-roader, it was discontinued in Japan in 2019 and was only available in developing countries, which completely ceased production in 2021, and the Pajero was completely dead. Now, if you're a Pajero fan, the good news is that a 5th generation has been teased as of May 2026 and is expected to be revealed by the end of the 3rd quarter of 2026. So they're bringing the Pajero and Montero name back from the dead. Hopefully we do get it in America. I would love to see it. The Pajero was so popular at one time that it spun off the Pajero Mini K SUV in Japan, and the Pajero Junior, the smaller version, and then that turned into the Pajero IO, a slightly bigger but still smaller version of the Pajero. The Pajero name was so popular at one point that there was up to 3 different models sharing the Pajero name. It was a great seller in the West Asia and Africa and in Europe, and sold pretty good in North America as well. It was considered one of the premier off-road SUVs at one point, and it was a shame to see it die. I'm very excited to have it come back, and that's partially because I've become a little bit of a fan of the Pajero name because of the vehicle behind me. But the Pajero does not have a super significant car history with a lot of accolades. It did have a lot of sales success at one point. Its biggest accomplishment under the name was in Dakar, which, like I said, we will have a video coming up on the history of the Pajero in Dakar. But the history, there's not a lot of high points to talk about unless you wanted to really get into sales numbers. But it was a popular vehicle at one point, and it was a capable off-roader, and it led to one of the coolest homologation specials ever. But that is the brief version of the history of the Pajero. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you like this type of content and want to see it first. And comment down below what you think of the Pajero. What's your favorite generation? Are you excited for it to come back? Do you love the Pajero evolution? Let me know everything you think in the comments down below. And link down below is my Instagram and TikTok for cars, as well as my hiking Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube channel if you want to support me here, there, or anywhere. I do appreciate it. And make sure, like I said, you subscribe and hit that notification bell, especially if you want to see that Dakar Pajero history and you want to see it first. And thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Have a good day. Bye.